The English language was shaped by several conquests, religions, and invasions. One of the most important factors in the change of the English language was Latin's incorporation into English. Latin words are common in sophisticated English today, making up over 90% of the language, mostly in scientific and legal terms. But English is inherently Germanic, with its origins in the languages of the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes. How did English become what it is today? Two of the main causes for the Latinization of English were the Christianization of England and the Northern Renaissance.
Christianity helped spread Latin to the Anglo-Saxons. In the 1st century AD, Britain believed in pagan gods, which meant they believed in multiple gods and idols. Christianity came from the East and brought with it chaos and various havoc. Basically, Christianity demanded the complete loyalty of its members, which it refused to accept other gods, dismissing them as fake or made up. This made Roman officials very upset with Christians. However, as upset as they might have been, Christianity appealed to the Roman Emperor Constantine, and he used its monotheistic ways to unite his people under one God and gain military success. This made Christianity acceptable in Rome from 13 AD, 313 AD, and onwards. In the 4th century, it was acceptable to be Christian in Britain, but no one really followed the religion, and there were still pagan gods. It was there, kind of like having a really good main course, and then there was a side of vegetables. It was there, but no one really messed with it. However, just as things were settling, just as it was all settling and Christianity was maintaining an adequate amount of relevance, the Anglo-Saxons and Jutes attacked, which raised the belief in pagan gods higher. Although Christianity seemed on the Although Christianity seemed on the brink of defeat, it survived the Dark Ages by sending missionaries to places like Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. This made Christianity appear in mainland Britain, in Augustine's quest from the Pope in 597 AD also gave Christianity a strong future, which of course was attacked once again by the Vikings in 871 AD. Christianity survived yet another battle, which resulted in paganism rising and it shrinking. Monasteries were under attack and priests fled for their lives. Everything was looking grim until one man, the Christian king of Wessex, viewed the attacks as punishments from God and set up learning centers to help educate the masses after the Battle of Edington was won. This caused Christianity to be more prominent in the lives of British citizens. With the introduction of the new religion, of course, came a new language as well. St. Augustine and his group of missionaries brought with them Latin as well as Christianity. Celts and early Anglo-Saxons used a runic alphabet of triangular symbols that was infused with the Roman alphabet, which was easy to read and write with. Along with a new alphabet, religious terms and rituals were also added to the language as well. However, as prominent as the language was, it was mostly used to read and write with and was rarely spoken.
Latin influenced the development of Old English more than any other non-West Germanic language that Old English came into contact with. There are three time periods that scholars split Latin into. The first time period is influences that occurred on the continent prior to the arrival of the Anglo-Saxons. The second time period is the influences that span from the arrival of the Anglo-Saxons in England up to their Christianization. The third and last period of influence spanned from the time Christianization up to the arrival of the Normans. The spread of Christianity came with the building of churches. Churches provided education in a wide range of subjects. Some of those subjects were poetry, astronomy, and arithmetic. Words from the churches came from Latin, Greek, and Hebrew. The primary language of the churches was Latin. The Christian Bible was written in Latin, and those services were led in Latin. Christianizing Britain meant that Latin words would be incorporated into their language, and many examples of these words will be given. A religious word, nun, comes from the Latin word nona, which then became non, in Old English, which is where we got our modern-day word, nun. In education, many words originated in Latin. Some examples are school and paper. School comes from scula, which is Latin, and then became school in Old English, which then we got our modern word school. Paper comes from Latin word papyrus to the Anglo-Norman French papier, And those three words are only a couple of the examples.
While the basic structure of English was derived from many Anglo-Saxon languages and Celtic tongue, the original language found in that area might have had a huge influence on the grammatical structure of English. A lot of the vocabulary found in English comes from a variety of languages. In the Middle English period, English derived a lot of traits, roots, and words from popular languages like Latin. After its basic start, English went through many periods where it experienced major change. One of these periods was the Great Vowel Shift. During the Great Vowel Shift, English lost the purer vowel sounds of most European languages along with the phonetic pairing between long and short vowel sounds. Most affected were the long vowel pronunciations. An example of this is that sheep would have been pronounced shape before the changes. A major factor for this shift was the large intake in words from other languages, which all had a different kind of pronunciation, especially Latin and French. Due to this, the Great Vowel Shift left English sounding a lot like Latin. The Great Vowel Shift gave rise to many of the oddities of English pronunciation, and now obscures the relationships between many English words and their foreign counterparts. Another big change this shift brought was the new spelling of many words to go along with the new pronunciations. It affected words of both native ancestry as well as borrowings from French and Latin.
The Italian Renaissance, which occurred around the 1400s, was a time of change in Mediterranean areas. The styles of the Renaissance era were retro in that many aspects of their culture mimicked ancient Rome. Simultaneously, people started to question the church, and the philosophies of humanism, individualism, and secularism were born. There were three main causes for the Renaissance. First, Italy sits upon the ruins of the ancient Roman Empire, meaning that its geography is important. Adding on to this point, many monasteries were located in Italy, with monks that kept old classics alive. Next, the printing press fueled the spread of ideas by allowing books other than the Bible to be mass printed. Finally, trade connected say-says became common, allowing people to communicate easily. These changes created the Italian Renaissance, which in turn led to changes in many aspects of study and daily life. Secularism, the appreciation of the here and now more than the afterlife. Humanism, the belief that humans are the most important beings in the world. And individualism, the idea that individuals can get stuff done without being in a group, all developed and grew during the Renaissance. These philosophies translated to changes in art. For example, humanist philosophies encourage detailed depiction of the human body as beautiful by itself, and not just as a tool to please a god. Individualism allowed eccentric people like Leonardo da Vinci to be themselves without being encumbered with the societal norms of the time. Humanism, secularism, and individualism also changed education, in which people learned practical knowledge from newly printed books, and science, which experiments a blossoming known as the scientific revolution. But perhaps more important in the evolution of the English language was the smaller Northern Renaissance. The Northern European feudal system and its church had stronger control than those in Italy, so the Northern Renaissance was more Christian than its Italian predecessor. However, during this time period, which occurred in the 1500s, the same ideas that had flourished in the Italian Renaissance were able to move northward into several countries, including England. Old art and architecture styles became fashionable, and more people learned Greek and Latin. Several factors led to the Northern Renaissance. First, countries in the north became wealthier and could give more money to the intellectual pursuits because of conquest and urbanization. Next, trade and printing combined with the French colonization of Italy, created an environment in which ideas spread very quickly. Finally, the emergence of towns, combined with changes in government in neighboring nations, led to the decline of the ancient northern feudal system. Generally, the Northern Renaissance was not as artistic as the Italian Renaissance and was more religious. The most important overall effect of the Northern Renaissance was the Protestant Reformation, in which Protestant Christianity was born. Literature was reshaped as well, with more books about events in this world and writers trying to replicate old writing styles. The English language also adopted many words from Latin during the Northern Renaissance.
There were also many changes that occurred during the Renaissance. This time period was when English expanded its vocabulary the most. Since Latin was the language of education, English took many words from it, especially words that didn't have an equivalent in English. It even deliberately took words without any modifications. Some examples are genius, species, militia, radius, and specimen. In this process, English replaced already existing words with Latin replacements too, losing some original words in the process. Aside from the words, English even borrowed Latin and Greek suffixes such as "is" and "ism" along with the rules within the languages. Quote unquote. Sometimes, Latin-based adjectives were introduced to plug lexical gaps where no adjective was available for an existing Germanic noun. An example of this would be marine for sea or pedestrian for walk. They were also applied to existing adjectives that were informal, such as aquatic for watery, and even as synonyms to already existing adjectives. As the Renaissance came to an end, pronunciations were also adopted out of respect for their Latin roots. Pronunciation changes, such as the silent B, S, H, and P. Another huge thing to come out of the Renaissance was the printing press. These presses had an especially big impact on English. When time came to print the Bible, publishers realized that there were many different dialects of English and that they had to standardize one. They chose Northern English. Because of this decision, the English we speak today is an evolved version of that English.
The English language would not be the same without the incorporation of Latin. Without it, we would still be using a crude alphabet instead of the one that is easier to read and write with. Furthermore, Latin is the language of scholars, and English took words from Latin. That means a majority of the larger words on SATs and big tests usually come from Latin. Throughout the course of history, English has survived many battles, invasions, and undergone many religious changes, which have helped shape it into the language it is today.